The defense countered, a crime of passion, a human reaction to years of lies and emotional manipulation. The judge reminded the jury to weigh the facts carefully, to consider not only the actions, but the psychological context, the moral complexity. Outside the courtroom, news crews crowded the steps, microphones shoved toward anyone willing to speak. "Do you think she's guilty?" One shouted. "Was it self-defense?" Another asked. The townspeople debated loudly, their opinions splintered, reflecting the division that the case had sown through Willow Creek. Inside, Lena sat quietly as the jury deliberated. Her eyes wandered to the empty seat that had been Daniel's, then to Sarah, whose hands trembled slightly. The room felt suspended in time, between judgment and mercy, crime and consequence, betrayal and love. Narration carried the weight of the moment. The courtroom was no longer a place of law alone, but a theater of human emotion, a stage for moral ambiguity. Every glance, every whispered word, every pause held meaning beyond the legal definitions of right and wrong. As the foreperson rose to deliver the verdict, Lena's breath caught. The room held its collective heartbeat. Outside, the sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long and cold, reflecting the tension inside. And in that pause, she realized something. No matter the verdict, nothing would ever be the same. The sirens sliced through the quiet Detroit night like a warning no one had wanted to hear. Red and blue lights painted the snow-covered street in violent streaks as the first police cruiser rolled to a stop outside the Hale residence. Detective Laura Briggs stepped out, her breath fogging instantly in the January air. It was bitter cold, the kind that froze fingers and slowed the world. Her boots crunched on the driveway as she followed the beam of a flashlight leading to the garage. The call had come in 15 minutes ago. Possible homicide, male victim, father on scene. No other details. Inside the open garage, the cold was worse. It mixed with the metallic scent of blood and the faint, oily smell of motor tools. A single hanging bulb swayed slightly above, its flicker casting long, uneven shadows on the walls, and there he was. A man in his late 50s sat slumped on a low wooden stool, his work jacket spattered dark. Beside him lay the body of a younger man, early 20s, crumpled near the rear of an old Chevy truck. The stillness of death clung to him like frost. The father, Richard Hale, did not look up as the officers entered. His hands, reddened by more than the cold, rested uselessly on his knees. "Sir," an officer said cautiously, "we need you to step outside." Richard's head tilted slightly, as though the words had taken a long time to reach him. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he murmured. His voice was hoarse, fragile, like something left out in the winter too long. Detective Briggs crouched near the body. No weapon in sight, no signs of forced entry, just a dead son and a father who looked more like a ghost than a suspect. "What happened here?" she asked softly. Richard didn't answer. His gaze stayed locked on the young man's face, pale under the weak bulb. A moment passed before he whispered, almost to himself, "My boy, my boy." The paramedics moved in, checking for what they already knew wasn't there. One of them shook his head, quietly signaling Briggs. Time of death, unknown but recent. Outside, neighbors had begun gathering in coats and hats, murmuring in the cold. A single mother across the street held her son's hand tighter, eyes wide at the sight of police tape unrolling across the Hale driveway. Briggs stood and stepped closer to Richard. "We need to understand what happened tonight. Will you talk to me?" He finally looked at her, his eyes bloodshot, hollowed out. You want to know," he said slowly, voice breaking, "how a father ends up here, sitting next to his own son, who's lying dead on the floor." Briggs nodded once. Richard let out a sound that was part laugh, part sob. "Then you'll have to start at the beginning, before the papers, before Angela, before all of it." He closed his eyes. The muscles in his jaw tightened as if holding back a flood. Briggs exchanged a glance with her partner. There was history here, a story stretching back beyond this night, twisted and heavy, waiting to be unraveled. "Take him in," she said quietly. "We'll hear it all." As officers led Richard toward the cruiser, snowflakes drifted into the garage, settling on the boy's still form. Somewhere deep inside, beneath shock and guilt, Richard Hale knew this was only the beginning, and the beginning always starts with family. The interrogation room smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. Detective Briggs sat across from Richard Hale, a paper cup of water untouched in front of him. He looked less like a murderer than a man carrying decades of exhaustion. "You said we should start at the beginning," she reminded him softly. Richard stared at the table, his fingers tracing the rim of the cup without drinking. His voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. "My boy," he began. "He wasn't always like what you saw tonight." And just like that, the story drifted backward in time. Detroit, 2 years earlier. Richard Hale lived in a modest brick house on the city's east side. Life had been simple then. He ran a small auto repair shop, the kind of place where grease lived under your fingernails and every neighbor knew your name. And Evan, Evan was his pride. The boy had grown tall, with his mother's dark eyes and a stubborn streak that made Richard shake his head, but secretly smile. He wasn't like the other kids on the block who drifted toward trouble. Evan had dreams. College, maybe even owning his own business one day. Richard would sit on the porch after long days at the shop, watching Evan work on his old Chevy, sleeves rolled up, music drifting from the garage. Those were the moments that made all the years of busted knuckles and unpaid bills worth it. "You keep that truck running, son," Richard would call out, "and she might just outlive me." Evan would grin, wiping sweat and engine oil from his brow. "She already has, Dad. This thing's immortal." They'd laugh, the kind of easy laughter that belonged to fathers and sons who didn't need many words. But beneath it all, there was something else, something Richard barely noticed at first. It started with Evan's late nights. Studying, he claimed. Hanging out with friends, Richard didn't push. He remembered being young once, remembered needing space. Besides, Evan was a good kid. He worked part-time at the shop, helped with bills, never asked for much. Yet sometimes, when Evan came home after midnight, Richard would catch a flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not guilt, something harder to read, like he was carrying a secret too heavy for his young shoulders. One night, Richard found him sitting alone in the garage, engine off, music silent. "You okay, son?" he asked. Evan nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." Richard wanted to press, but he didn't. Fathers sometimes believe silence equals trust. He would learn, too late, that it often equals distance. Back in the interrogation room, Richard's voice caught as he spoke. "He was my whole world," he said. "After his mother passed, it was just us. I thought we were solid, unshakable." Briggs studied him carefully. But something changed. Richard's eyes darkened. "Yeah," he whispered. Something changed. He didn't elaborate, not yet. Instead, he stared at the wall as though it held memories too heavy to carry aloud. Outside the window, snow began to fall over Detroit again, soft and relentless. That winter 2 years ago marked the last time Richard remembered life feeling normal, before the cracks appeared, before the papers and the woman in the shadows, before trust turned into suspicion. As he left the garage that night, watching Evan bent over the Chevy with determination in his eyes, Richard had no idea how far they both would fall, and how quickly. Richard's memories moved forward like a film reel, speeding through moments he wished he could pause. The laughter in the garage, the porch talks, the sense of pride that used to fill the air like gasoline fumes after a tune-up. But even pride can sour if left too long in silence. It began with the phone calls. At first, they came late at night, muffled voices drifting from Evan's room when he thought his father was asleep. Richard would hear the low murmur, the occasional sharp whisper, then the click of the call ending. One night, around midnight, Richard caught a fragment as he passed the door on his way to the kitchen. "Yeah, I told you I'll get it. Just trust me, all right?" The tone was clipped, urgent, not the easygoing voice Richard knew. He froze outside the door for a moment, waiting for more. But Evan lowered his voice until it was only a hum behind wood. When Richard pushed the door open, Evan jumped, shoving his phone into his pocket. "Dad," he said too quickly. "You scared me," Richard squinted. "Who are you talking to?" "Just a friend." Sounded serious. Homework stuff. Group project. The lie sat between them like an oil stain spreading across concrete. Richard wanted to believe it. Maybe part of him did. But something in his son's eyes had changed, like glass, catching light at the wrong angle. The nights out grew longer after that. Evan would grab his jacket, mutter something about studying, and disappear until the early hours. When Richard asked where he'd been, the answers were vague. Out. With friends. Nothing you need to worry about, Dad. One evening, Richard pushed harder. You've been different lately. I just want to know what's going on. Evan sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. I'm fine. Can you stop acting like I'm 10 years old? Richard felt the sting but bit his tongue. It wasn't the words so much as the edge in Evan's voice, like a door slowly closing between them. Then came the first real argument. It was over dinner, meatloaf cooling on their plates while the television murmured in the background. Richard mentioned the late nights again, trying to sound casual. Evan slammed his fork down. Why do you have to control everything I do? Control? Richard shot back. I'm trying to be your father. That's not control, that's called caring. You wouldn't understand, Evan muttered, pushing his chair back. Then make me understand, Richard snapped, anger flaring before he could stop it. But Evan only shook his head and walked out the door, leaving Richard staring at the empty chair, the house suddenly too quiet. Back in the interrogation room, Detective Briggs watched Richard closely as he recounted these nights. You didn't follow him? She asked. Richard hesitated. Not then. I thought, maybe he just needed space. Boys grow up. They want lives of their own. But you didn't believe that. No, Richard admitted softly. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what. He rubbed his face with rough hands, the weight of hindsight pressing hard. It's like I could feel the ground shifting under us, but I kept telling myself it was nothing. It wouldn't be nothing for long. Because one night, Richard decided to follow, and what he found would crack his world wide open. The night Richard finally followed his son was colder than most. Wind carved through Detroit's streets, carrying bits of trash and the faint hum of traffic from the freeway. He kept his headlights off as much as he dared, trailing Evan's old sedan from 2 blocks back. Evan drove like he was late for something. Not reckless, but with purpose. He didn't stop at the usual places, no friends' houses, no school buildings. Instead, he headed toward a part of town Richard rarely visited anymore, where the neon signs buzzed over shuttered storefronts and the liquor stores stayed open past midnight. Richard's grip tightened on the wheel. Something was wrong. He parked a few spots away when Evan finally pulled into the cracked lot of a rundown motel, the kind of place that rented by the hour. Its flickering sign read, Riverview Inn, though there was no river in sight. Richard killed the engine and watched. Evan stepped out, glancing around like a man who didn't want to be seen. Then she appeared. A woman, maybe late 30s or early 40s, climbed out of a dented blue car 2 spaces over. Tall, sharp features softened only by heavy makeup. A fur-lined coat wrapped tight against the wind. She walked straight to Evan, her heels clicking on broken pavement. They spoke briefly. Even from a distance, Richard could see it wasn't casual. Her hand touched Evan's arm once, then again, not affectionate, more controlling. The two disappeared into the motel's front office, where a bored clerk barely looked up from his magazine. Richard sat in his truck for nearly an hour, heart thudding as the cold crept through his jacket. When they finally emerged, the woman was speaking fast, her expression tight. Evan looked like he was arguing but gave up quickly, rubbing his face with both hands. The woman lit a cigarette, exhaling toward the sky, and Richard caught the glow of the ember as she leaned close to Evan. Whatever she said made him nod reluctantly. She left first, climbing into her blue car and driving off. Evan stood there a moment, shoulders slumped, before heading back to his own car. Back in the interrogation room, Richard's voice grew rough as he recalled it. I thought maybe... He stopped, shaking his head. I didn't know what to think. Drugs? Gambling? That woman, she wasn't just some friend. She had him wrapped around her finger. Detective Briggs scribbled something in her notebook. Did you confront him that night? Richard stared at his hands. No, I followed him home. He didn't even know I'd been there. Why not go straight to him? Because, Richard said slowly, I needed to know what she wanted from my boy. The next day, Richard returned to the Riverview Inn alone. The clerk barely looked up when Richard slid a photo of Evan across the counter. Kid was here last night, with a woman. You know her name? The clerk smirked. Guy pays cash, minds his business. So do I. But fate didn't need the clerk's help. As Richard left, he spotted the blue car parked around the side. Through the windshield, a stack of envelopes sat on the passenger seat, thick and neatly rubber-banded. He couldn't see the names on them then. But soon he would. Richard couldn't shake the image of that woman's car. The blue sedan with the stack of envelopes sitting in plain view like bait left. Out in the open. For 2 nights, he barely slept. He worked long hours at the shop, came home to cold dinners, and waited for Evan's car to pull into the driveway long after midnight. When it did, there were no explanations, no apologies, only tired excuses and a son who refused to meet his eyes. Richard felt it building, the storm he couldn't name yet. The discovery came on a Thursday evening. Evan had left for study group, though Richard doubted there were any books involved. The house felt empty, except for the wind rattling loose siding outside. Richard wasn't looking for anything when he stepped into Evan's room. He told himself that later. He was just tidying up, maybe leaving a fresh set of towels like he used to when Evan was little. Fathers did that sort of thing. But the desk drawer stuck when he tried to close it. Papers had jammed in the back. He pulled them out, meaning only to set them straight. Then he saw the first policy, and the second, and the third. There were at least a dozen envelopes, all from different insurance companies, all addressed to Evan Hale. Each one listed a life insurance policy with staggering payout amounts, 50,000, 100,000, some even more. Richard scanned the documents, his throat tightening. The beneficiary name repeated over and over, neat and official, Richard Hale. At first it made no sense. These weren't policies Richard had signed. He hadn't approved anything. Why would Evan? Then his eyes caught the forged signature at the bottom of each form. His signature. Richard sank onto the bed, the papers trembling in his hands. He remembered the motel woman's sharp voice, the way she leaned in close to Evan. He remembered Evan's late nights, the secret phone calls, the envelopes in her car. This wasn't about college money. This wasn't about some side hustle Evan didn't want his father to know about. This was fraud, and Evan had dragged his father's name straight into it. When Evan came home near midnight, Richard was waiting at the kitchen table, the papers spread out like evidence in a courtroom. "Want to explain this?" Richard asked, voice low. Evan froze in the doorway. "Where did you—" "Doesn't matter where. What matters is why my name's on all these." Richard shoved a stack toward him. "Do you know what forgery carries in this state? Do you have any idea what this looks like?" Evan's jaw tightened. "It's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think." Richard's voice rose, years of trust cracking under its weight. "You and that woman, you're planning something. Something illegal." Evan shook his head, too fast. "It's just paperwork. It's nothing." "Nothing?" Richard slammed a hand on the table. "You forged my name, Evan. My name. For what? Some get-rich-quick scam?" Evan's eyes flickered. Guilt, fear, something darker. "It's handled. You don't need to get involved." Richard stared at him, disbelief hollowing his chest. "I'm already involved, whether I wanted to be or not." Later, after Evan stormed off to his room, Richard sat alone under the kitchen light, the papers fanned out before him. One thought kept circling, sharp and relentless. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a plan, and he had no idea how deep it went. Richard didn't sleep that night. The kitchen light burned above him like a guilty eye as he stared at the stack of insurance papers. They weren't just papers. They were proof that his son had been planning behind his back, forging signatures, scheming for a payout. By morning, he had a plan. He needed answers. Not from Evan first, not yet. Angela was the link, the shadow that had slithered into his son's life and tangled everything. He tracked her down to a small apartment building on the outskirts of the city. The brick facade was chipped, the hallway dim, smelling faintly of mildew and old smoke. He knocked on her door with the weight of desperation and anger, but Angela opened it with a calm that made his blood run hotter. "Richard," she said, almost mockingly, her cigarette still smouldering in her hand. "I figured you'd come. You know exactly what I want," Richard said, his voice taut. "Where does Evan stand in all of this?" Angela tilted her head, lips curving into a faint smirk. "Evan, he's ambitious. A smart boy. But he needed guidance. That's all." Richard felt a chill creep along his spine. Guidance? From her? This wasn't guidance, it was manipulation. Years of pride, love, and trust were unraveling in front of his eyes. "I don't want excuses," he said. "I want the truth." "How deep is he in? Is he just listening to you, or is he driving this?" Angela exhaled slowly, letting the smoke curl around her face. "Honestly," she said softly, "he's driving it. I might have suggested a few things, but the idea, it was all his. He wanted it. He planned it." Richard's hands tightened into fists. His son? Planning fraud? His own son, the boy he had raised, the boy he had trusted, had mapped out a life-threatening scheme with him unknowingly as the pawn. You're telling me he wanted to stage his own death? Richard's voice cracked. Angela's eyes didn't waver. He wanted the payout. He didn't care what had to happen to get it. And honestly, Richard, he's very clever. He thought he could control it all. Richard took a step back, trying to breathe. And you helped him? Only enough to make sure he didn't fail, she said lightly, flicking ash from her cigarette. I didn't make him do anything. Her words were poison, each one slicing at Richard's chest. He could feel his heart pounding, each beat louder than the last. I trusted him, he whispered. I believed he was my son. How could he do this? Angela shrugged, almost lazily. Boys grow into men, Richard. Some faster than others. Some, they surprise you. Some break you. Richard's mind spun. The garage, the late nights, the envelopes in her car, it all fit. Every secret phone call, every lie, every vanished hour. His son had hidden the truth in plain sight, with him none the wiser. He turned toward the door, voice shaking. I have to talk to him. I need to hear it from him. All of it. Angela didn't stop him. She just watched, cigarette smoke curling like a veil, as if she already knew the outcome. Back at home, Richard stared at the empty garage, the space that had once been filled with laughter and oil-stained afternoons. Now it was silent, a hollow cavern echoing betrayal. He imagined Evan there, smirking, clever, untouchable in his schemes. Richard knew confrontation was inevitable. It was the only way to untangle the web his son had spun around both of them. He sank into the old stool near the workbench, staring at the dim bulb above. The anger was building, but so was a different feeling, a sorrow deep and cold. A father who had loved his son might never feel whole again, and soon, that confrontation would happen. Richard waited in the garage, hands gripping the edge of the workbench, knuckles white under the harsh flicker of the single overhead bulb. The air smelled of motor oil and winter dampness, thick and oppressive. Every creak of the house settling sounded like a warning. Evan's footsteps echoed from the kitchen, hesitant at first, then firmer as he realized his father was there. The boy stepped into the garage, hood of his jacket pulled low, eyes darting like a trapped animal's. You wanted to talk, Evan said, voice tight. I need to talk, Richard replied, voice low, measured, but trembling beneath the surface. Sit down, now. Evan hesitated, then dropped onto the stool opposite his father, arms crossed. Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Richard's gaze fell on his son's face, the same face he had watched grow for 20 years, now a stranger staring back. Do you have any idea what you've done? The lies, the forgery, the plans? Evan shifted uncomfortably. Dad, it wasn't supposed to get out of hand. Not supposed to. Not supposed to. Richard's voice cracked like breaking glass. You forged my name, hid things from me, and plotted something I shouldn't even know. Did it ever occur to you how this would feel for me? Evan swallowed, his jaw tightening. I didn't think you'd understand. Richard's hands shot out, slamming onto the table. Understand? I raised you. I taught you right from wrong. You were supposed to be my son, Evan, my blood. And now you... He broke off, chest heaving, eyes stinging with unshed tears. Evan's voice was quiet, defensive. I just wanted a way out. I wanted control. You don't get it. You never get it. Richard's head fell into his hands, then lifted slowly, voice lower, trembling with rage and heartbreak. Control? Do you know the word you've twisted? Control isn't hurting the people who love you. Control isn't betraying the person who gave you everything. You think you know everything. Evan snapped, leaning forward. I'm not the kid you think I am. I'm smarter than you. I can fix this, Dad. You can't see it. Richard's eyes burned. He rose, stepping closer, the chill of the garage matching the ice in his chest. Fix it? You think this is fixable? Do you think the law cares about your plans? About how clever you think you are? You've stolen from me, from yourself, and for what? Money? Greed? Evan's face paled. It's not just money. Richard's voice dropped to a whisper heavy with despair. Then what is it, Evan? Tell me. Why betray me? Why destroy the trust we had? The silence that followed was deafening. Only the faint hum of the garage fridge and distant city traffic filled the air. Evan looked down at his hands, shaking slightly. I didn't mean. I just wanted... Richard stepped closer still, the weight of 20 years pressing down. You wanted to lie. You wanted to cheat. You wanted me out of the picture, Evan. And for what? Evan flinched as his father's words cut sharper than any blade. Tears pooled in Richard's eyes. Not just anger now, but grief. I loved you. Every day I loved you, and you made me question everything. The boy's lips trembled. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Richard's fists shook at his sides. For a long moment, the only sound was their breathing, ragged and uneven. The garage felt smaller, heavier, suffocating. Years of pride, laughter, and fatherly love crashed against the wall of betrayal and desperation. Finally, Richard sank into his chair beside the workbench, exhaustion overtaking him. I don't know if this can be fixed, he said, voice hollow. But you need to understand something. Everything you've done, it changes us. Forever. Evan nodded slowly, too drained to argue, eyes haunted. I know, Dad. Richard leaned back, staring at the dim bulb above, the shadowed walls of the garage pressing in. He thought of all the lessons he had tried to teach, all the moments he had hoped would guide his son. They felt meaningless now, fragile like the ice on the driveway outside. And yet, beneath the despair, a hard truth crystallized. The confrontation had begun. The reckoning had begun. Nothing would ever be the same. The garage was silent again, but the tension lingered, unbroken, waiting for what would come next. The garage was colder than ever that night, the single bulb casting uneven shadows that danced across the walls like ghosts. Richard stood motionless, staring at the workbench littered with insurance papers, Evan's discarded jacket, and the faint smudge of engine grease. Everything inside him felt raw and stretched thin, taut like a wire that could snap at any second. Years of love, trust, pride, and hope had all been corroded by secrecy, lies, and betrayal. Evan leaned against the car, voice quiet, almost pleading. Dad, I can fix this. Just let me handle it. Richard's hands shook as he gripped the edge of the bench. Fix it, fix it. Do you know what you've done to me, to us? His voice trembled, oscillating between rage and despair. I raised you. I taught you right from wrong, and now you sit there acting like this is some game. I didn't, Evan began, but Richard cut him off with a sharp motion. No, enough! Richard's knees bent slightly as his heart thudded painfully against his chest. Do you even know what it feels like to look at someone you love and realize they don't exist in the way you thought? To see someone capable of this? Evan flinched. The words hit harder than any punch could. His eyes darted to the workbench, to the papers that spelled out his schemes in black and white. He wanted to speak, to argue, to reason. But Richard's presence filled the room, pressing him back against the cold concrete floor in more ways than one. Richard's chest heaved. He wanted to cry. He wanted to scream. He wanted to turn the world upside down and make sense of the chaos. But the air was thick, heavy, impossible to move through. You were my son, he whispered, almost breaking. My blood, my pride, and now all I see is betrayal, greed, lies. Evan's hands shook as he raised them slightly. I didn't mean. Richard stepped closer. The cold of the garage seemed to seep into his bones. You didn't mean. You didn't mean. Every late night, every secret phone call, every smirk, every lie. You meant it all. The words hung in the air like frost, each syllable sharp and frozen. Evan's face paled, lips trembling, eyes brimming with panic. Richard's vision blurred with rage and grief. Years of patience, of fatherhood, of trust had come to this single moment. The storm inside him boiled over. He could feel his hands tightening into fists, his heartbeat deafening in his ears, a drum marking the end of restraint. You think I'm going to forgive this? He whispered, voice low and trembling. You think I can just move on? Evan shook his head, unable to speak, unable to stop the tide of emotion crashing between them. Richard's legs gave way slightly as exhaustion and fury collided. He sank to his knees, then to the floor, his body trembling from cold, from grief, from a lifetime of broken trust. The garage smelled of grease, oil, and something metallic that wasn't just from the car. Richard felt it crawl along his skin like a warning he could no longer heed. I wanted to believe in you, he said quietly, more to himself than to Evan. I wanted to believe that everything I taught you meant something. That love meant something. That we meant something. But it's all gone. Evan finally spoke, voice small, broken. Dad, please. Richard's head dropped to the concrete. The weight of betrayal, exhaustion, and despair pressed him into silence. He closed his eyes. The past, the present, the future colliding in a dizzying storm of emotion. He realized then that there was no coming back from this night. No amount of reasoning, pleading, or planning could undo the fracture between them. The breaking point had arrived, not in anger alone, not in a single outburst, but in the quiet, cold understanding that the world he knew had ended. And in that silence, in that frozen garage, Richard Hale felt the full gravity of everything his son had done, and the inevitable choices that awaited them both. The snow outside drifted in through the slightly open garage door, settling on the cracked concrete floor, silent and pure, a stark contrast to the storm that had erupted inside. The night was far from over, and neither of them would leave unchanged. The snow had started falling hours earlier, soft and relentless, coating the driveway, the roof, and the empty streets outside. Inside the garage, the world was still. Frost clung to the edges of the single bulb, the pale light trembling as though unsure whether to illuminate or retreat. Richard sat slumped against the workbench, legs stretched stiffly before him. The papers, the plans, the betrayals, they were all gone now, or irrelevant. What remained was a silence heavier than any sound he had ever known. He stared at the form on the concrete, Evan's body sprawled unnaturally, lifeless. Every detail, the tilt of the head, the slackened arms, the faint blush of cold on the skin, etched itself into his mind like a photograph. The first siren was distant, a faint wail in the night, then another, closer. He could hear the crunch of boots on snow, the murmured commands of police officers, but it all felt unreal, as if someone else's tragedy had been superimposed over his life. A paramedic bent over Evan, checking for a pulse that wasn't there. Richard's throat tightened. I did it, he whispered, almost inaudible. A confession and a plea rolled into one. One officer stepped forward. Sir, we need you to step outside. Talk to us. Richard's head lolled back against the wall, eyes tracing the flickering bulb above. Talk? He echoed. What can I say? That my son, my boy, betrayed me? That he tried to steal everything I built? His voice cracked. It's too late for words. The paramedic shook his head, murmuring to the officer. They didn't need an explanation. The truth was written across the scene. The silence, the blood, the shattered trust. Richard tried to stand, but faltered. His legs refused to obey, knees buckling under the weight of grief, rage, and shock. The snow outside drifted closer through the small gap in the garage door, settling on Evan's still form, soft and pure, a cruel contrast to the horror inside. Detective Briggs crouched beside him, notebook in hand, voice calm but firm. Richard, I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Step by step. Richard shook his head slowly. There is no beginning tonight. Not here, not anymore. It's all gone, burned to nothing by greed and lies. Evan's faint scent of soap and faint cologne still lingered. Richard inhaled sharply, the memories crashing over him. Childhood afternoons in the garage, laughter echoing in the shop, the pride of watching his boy grow. Now those images were ghosts, haunting the corners of the garage, unrelenting, accusing. I wanted him to be my son, Richard whispered. I wanted to believe. I wanted everything we had to mean something. His voice broke, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. But it didn't, not really, and now it's over. The snow outside thickened, muffling distant sounds, blanketing the world in white. Richard's hands rested on his knees, fingers trembling. The garage seemed impossibly large, echoing every heartbeat, every missed warning, every betrayal. Paramedics and officers moved around him, speaking in hushed tones, taking photos, recording evidence. He barely noticed. He was trapped in a frozen moment, suspended between past and future, the enormity of what had happened settling over him like the snow outside. He leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling, seeing not the bulb but years of moments replayed. Trust broken, secrets hidden, love betrayed. Finally, Detective Briggs knelt beside him. Sir, the ambulance is ready. We need to take you in. Richard's voice was a hollow echo. Take me where? To answer for a crime that had already begun long before tonight. Before the lies, the schemes, the papers. Take me where? The detective said nothing. She just guided him gently toward the door. Outside, the snow was endless, quiet, serene, and indifferent to the tragedy unfolding beneath it. The cold bit into his cheeks as he stepped out, the weight of the night pressing down. The silence in the snow was absolute. No one spoke. No one moved faster than the snowflakes drifting around him. And in that silence, Richard Hale understood fully. There would be no undoing this night. No repair, no redemption, only the heavy, unyielding truth of what had happened inside the garage and the cost it demanded.